Sometimes life's most extraordinary moments happen in the most ordinary places. At a small-town gas station in Silicon Valley's outskirts, Michael Chen, a dedicated single father and local high school teacher, stops to help a woman with a flat tire. He doesn't recognize her in her business suit and Tesla, but 20 years ago, she was Sarah Williams, the girl who taught him to believe in dreams. Now she's Sarah Williams Mitchell, CEO of one of the world's most innovative tech companies. As their hands touch over a tire iron, neither realizes they're about to rediscover what they lost 2 decades ago. Could a chance encounter at a gas station rewrite their love story that time forgot? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The familiar chime of Michael Chen's phone alarm blended with the first rays of sunlight streaming through his bedroom window. 5:30 a.m., the same time he'd woken up every school day for the past 15 years. He allowed himself exactly 1 minute to remember the strange encounter at the gas station yesterday, the woman's grateful smile triggering something in his memory he couldn't quite place. "Dad! The coffee maker's doing that weird thing again." Emily's voice carried from the kitchen, pulling him back to reality. At 17, his daughter had inherited his early bird tendencies, along with his stubborn determination to fix everything herself. "Coming, Em." He pushed aside thoughts of the mysterious woman and headed downstairs, navigating the familiar obstacle course of Emily's engineering projects. Their modest ranch-style house in Mountain View might not have the sleek sophistication of their Silicon Valley neighbors, but every corner held evidence of their shared passion for science and discovery. In the kitchen, Emily stood frowning at their ancient coffee maker, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, wearing her favorite MIT sweatshirt, a key gift from her junior robotics competition last summer. "I think the heating element's finally given up," she declared, already reaching for her toolbox under the sink. Michael smiled, remembering how he'd been exactly the same at her age. "Before you take it apart, try the reset button under the power cord, I know," Emily finished, rolling her eyes affectionately. "But after that, can we please try fixing it? The internal wiring must be shot, and I've been wanting to practice my soldering." This was their morning dance, Emily looking for any opportunity to put her engineering skills to use, Michael balancing encouragement with practicality. He glanced at the wall of thank you cards from former students, a colorful reminder of why he'd chosen teaching over the lucrative engineering career he'd once dreamed of. "Tell you what," he said, pulling out cereal bowls, "if you can explain the thermodynamic principles involved in coffee brewing to your physics class today, we'll upgrade this one instead of replacing it." Emily's eyes lit up. "Deal. And speaking of physics, did you finish grading our midterms?" Michael gestured to the stack of papers on the dining table, each one marked with his characteristic red pen and detailed explanations. "Just finished at midnight, including your extra credit question about quantum entanglement. Very ambitious. Did anyone get it right?" "2 students, but everyone who attempted it showed good reasoning." He paused, studying his daughter's hopeful expression. "And yes, you can see their answers after school." The morning unfolded in its familiar rhythm. Breakfast, punctuated by discussions of physics problems, Emily's college applications spread across the table like a paper tablecloth. Stanford, Berkeley, MIT, each one representing a future that made Michael's heart swell with pride and ache with anticipation. As they pulled into the faculty parking lot of Silicon Valley High, Michael spotted Principal Martinez waiting by the entrance. "Heads up, Em, looks like another STEM fair meeting." Emily gathered her backpack, excitement evident in her voice. "Did you hear? Some big tech companies sponsoring this year. Maybe we'll finally get that 3D printer for the robotics club." "We'll see," Michael replied, though his mind wandered back to the woman at the gas station. Something about her had seemed so familiar. The hallways of Silicon Valley High buzzed with morning energy as Michael made his way to his classroom. Room 204 had been his second home for 15 years, its walls covered with physics diagrams, inspirational quotes, and his pride and joy, the wall of achievement, showcasing his students' success stories. He paused at his desk, running his fingers over the worn edges of his old university physics textbook. Inside the cover, barely visible now, was an inscription he rarely allowed himself to read. To Michael, who taught me that the most powerful force in the universe isn't gravity, it's believing in yourself. As a www. The memory threatened to surface, but the first bell rang, drawing him back to the present. Students filed in, their chatter filling the room with energy and possibility. This was his world now, not the cutting-edge labs he'd once dreamed of, but a place where he could spark the same love for science that had shaped his life. "All right, everyone," he called out, picking up a piece of chalk. "Today we're going to explore why coffee makers break down and what thermodynamics can teach us about building better ones." He smiled, thinking of Emily's morning project. Who can tell me about heat transfer in a closed system? As hands shot up around the room, Michael felt the familiar surge of purpose that had guided him through the years since he'd chosen this path. Sometimes the most important discoveries weren't made in pristine laboratories or startup garages, but in moments of understanding, lighting up young faces, in questions that challenged conventional wisdom, in the quiet pride of watching students, his daughter included, grow into their potential. The woman from the gas station flickered through his mind once more, but he pushed the thought aside. He had equations to solve, minds to inspire, and a daughter to guide toward her dreams. That was more than enough for any man's happiness, or so he told himself, as sunlight streamed through the classroom windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like scattered memories, too distant now to grasp. The Forbes magazine, cover propped against Sarah Williams Mitchell's office window, caught the morning light, making her photo seem to glow. The Empathy Revolution, how Sarah Williams Mitchell is reshaping Silicon Valley's soul. She hadn't chosen the headline, would have preferred something focusing on Innovatech's groundbreaking AI developments rather than her personal narrative, but her PR team insisted it humanized her. 60 stories above San Francisco's bustling financial district, her corner office offered a view that still took her breath away. Fog rolled in beneath the Golden Gate Bridge, reminding her of another morning. 2 decades ago, when she'd driven across that bridge with very different dreams. "Ms. Williams Mitchell?" Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The board is gathering for the quarterly review." Sarah smoothed her tailored blazer, a habit from her early days when she'd felt like an imposter in rooms full of venture capitalists. "On my way, Jenny." The boardroom fell silent as she entered, 12 pairs of eyes following her progress to the head of the table. The latest earnings report displayed on the wall-mounted screen. Another record quarter, another set of expectations exceeded. Yet something about the gas station encounter yesterday had left her unsettled, stirring memories she'd carefully packed away. "Before we begin," she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had become her trademark, "I want to discuss our community investment initiative." She pulled up a new slide, revealing plans for Silicon Valley expansion. "We're not just building offices, we're building futures." Bradley Morrison, her longest-serving board member, leaned forward. "The shareholders are concerned about the profit margins on this project, Sarah. Community centers, educational partnerships. This isn't a charity." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "No, it's not. It's an investment in sustainable growth. The next generation of innovators won't come from ivory towers. They'll come from classrooms where teachers still believe in the power of discovery." The words surprised her, echoing conversations from long ago, a young man's voice in her memory. "It's not about building the fastest computer, Sarah. It's about teaching people to think differently." She pushed the memory aside, focusing on the presentation. The expansion plans highlighted Mountain View. She'd chosen it deliberately after recognizing him yesterday, though she wasn't ready to admit that to herself. The meeting progressed, numbers and projections flowing past like the fog outside. Sarah maintained her composure, but her mind kept drifting to the strange moment at the gas station. She hadn't recognized him at first. The Michael she remembered had worn wire-rimmed glasses and concert T-shirts, not the confident ease of a man comfortable in his chosen path. "Impressive numbers on the AI Ethics Initiative," commented Diana Chen, the newest board member. "The empathy-based programming is revolutionary." Sarah nodded, though the praise felt hollow. The algorithms were built on principles she'd first discussed in a college dorm room, arguing with Michael about technology's human impact until sunrise. After the meeting, she retreated to her office, dismissing Jenny's reminders about lunch. Appointments. The city spread below her, a maze of possibilities and paths not taken. She opened her laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard before typing Silicon Valley High School. The website loaded, and there he was, Michael Chen, Physics Department. His faculty photo showed the same kind eyes, the same subtle smile that had once made her believe anything was possible. The bio was modest, dedicated to inspiring the next generation of scientists and innovators. Sarah closed the browser, turning to the wall of awards that chronicled her rise to power. Patents, innovations, acquisitions, each achievement a step. Further from that gas station on the edge of town, from the life she might have had, her phone buzzed. Another crisis, another decision needed, another reminder that she'd built exactly the life she'd planned. Almost exactly. She stood, straightening her shoulders, pushing away the whispers of doubt that had crept in since yesterday. "Jenny," she called through the intercom, "get me everything you can find on educational technology initiatives in Mountain View. And contact our community outreach team. I want to discuss sponsoring a high school STEM fair." Through her window, the fog was finally lifting, revealing a city bathed in possibility. Sarah touched the glass, her reflection overlaying the urban landscape. "Time to give back," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she meant to the community or to herself. The afternoon sun caught the Forbes cover again, and this time Sarah saw past the polished image to the question in her own eyes. Sometimes success looked exactly like you'd imagined, but felt entirely different. Sometimes a flat tire on a quiet evening could shake loose everything you thought you'd figured out. She picked up her phone again. "Jenny, clear my schedule for the Mountain View site visit. I want to handle this one personally." As she gathered her things to leave, Sarah paused at her office door, looking back at the empire she'd built. It was everything she'd dreamed of that morning, on the bridge, 20 years ago. Everything except the one thing she'd never let herself miss, until a chance encounter with a kind teacher and a stubborn tire iron brought it all rushing back. Back in her private office that evening, Sarah sat in the dim light of her laptop screen, staring at the Mountain View High School faculty directory. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the personnel file her assistant had somehow obtained, something about public records and educational transparency. The gesture would have seemed stalkerish if she hadn't spent the last 24 hours trying to convince herself she was wrong about his identity. But there it was, in black and white, Michael Chen, PhD candidate, incomplete. In quantum engineering, Stanford University, 2005. The year everything changed. Sarah opened her bottom desk drawer, pulling out a worn leather planner, the only item she'd kept from her early startup days. Inside, pressed between pages of old meeting notes and preliminary code sequences, was a photograph. The University Robotics Club, 2004. She traced her finger over their younger selves, her with untamed curls and dreams too big for her second-hand laptop, him with those wire-rimmed glasses and the quiet confidence that had drawn her in from day one. "You really never left academia, did you?" she whispered to his image. The Michael she'd known had been brilliant. Theoretical physics came to him as naturally as breathing. Everyone had expected him to revolutionize quantum computing. Instead, according to his faculty bio, he'd spent the last 15 years teaching high school physics and coaching the robotics team. A message popped up. On her screen, preliminary plans for the STEM Fair sponsorship. Sarah clicked through the documents, her corporate mask slipping as she found what she'd been looking for, the organizing committee list. Michael Chen, faculty advisor. The memory hit her with unexpected force. A late night in the university lab, Michael explaining quantum entanglement while they shared cold pizza and impossible dreams. "It's beautiful," he'd said, eyes alight with passion. "Two particles, once connected, always affecting each other no matter how far apart they become. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance." "Sounds like love," she teased, but his expression had turned serious. "Maybe it is. Maybe some connections never really break. They just—" He'd paused, pushing up his glasses. "They just need the right observation to reveal their state." Sarah closed her eyes, letting the memory wash over her. They'd been so young, so certain that passion for science and each other would be enough. Then came the investment offers, the pressure to scale quickly, the endless debates about commercialization versus pure research. Her phone buzzed, a text from Jenny about tomorrow's schedule. Sarah ignored it, instead pulling up local news archives. From 2005. It took several searches to find it, a small announcement about a local physics teacher adopting a baby girl. The piece was brief, mentioning only that Michael Chen, a former doctoral candidate, had left his program to focus on single parenthood. The daughter, Emily, according to the school records, was in his AP physics class now. 17 years old. The timing explained everything. Why he'd withdrawn from the program, why he'd stopped returning her calls, why he'd chosen stability over innovation. Sarah leaned back, memories colliding with reality. She'd been so focused on her own trajectory, building Innovatech from a dream into a Fortune 500 company, that she'd never considered there might be more to his disappearance than academic burnout or fear of competition. Her computer chimed with another message. The STEM Fair budget awaiting approval. The numbers were modest by Innovatech standards, but she found herself adding a 0 to the end. If she was going to orchestrate this reunion, it would be on terms that benefited everyone. She pulled up the gas station security camera footage, which Jenny had somehow acquired. There he was, in crisp digital clarity, kneeling beside her Tesla with the same focused expression he'd once worn in the lab. How had she not recognized him immediately? But she knew why. She'd trained herself not to look back, to see only the future, the next innovation, the next milestone. The video played on her screen, their hands meeting over the tire iron, a moment of connection neither of them had been prepared for. She watched herself drive away, watched him stand there looking after her car with a puzzled expression. He hadn't recognized her either. The Sarah he'd known wouldn't have been caught dead in a business suit, much less driving a luxury car. A notification popped up. The STEM Fair committee meeting was scheduled for next week. Sarah found herself touching the screen where Michael's name appeared in the email thread. One meeting, and everything could change. Or nothing would change at all, and she'd learned that some quantum states, once collapsed, could never return to their original possibility. She looked around her office, at the awards and accolades that had filled the space where other dreams might have grown. The Sarah who'd fallen in love with a brilliant physicist had wanted to change the world through pure science. The Sarah who'd built Innovatech had changed it through market domination and strategic acquisitions. But maybe there was a third path, a way to honor both who she'd been and who she'd become. She opened a new document and began to type, Innovatech Community Innovation Initiative. The words flowed easily now, a vision of technology education that went beyond corporate philanthropy. This would be her bridge between worlds, the cutting-edge resources of her company, married to the hands-on mentorship she'd once valued above all else. Her fingers paused over the keyboard. Was she really going to upend everything? Her carefully structured world, her professional detachment, her board's expectations, for a chance to understand the road not taken. The answer came with surprising clarity. She already had. The moment she'd recognized him at the gas station, particles once entangled had revealed their persistent connection. Everything that followed was just physics playing out its inevitable course. Sarah closed her laptop, the city lights below her office twinkling like distant stars. In quantum mechanics, the act of observation changes the outcome. She was about to make a very deliberate observation indeed. Principal Martinez's conference. Room had never seen anything quite like this. The usual scattered arrangement of teachers and parent volunteers had been transformed by the presence of Innovatech's corporate team, their sleek laptops and polished presentations creating an odd contrast with the worn motivational posters. On the walls, Michael adjusted his tie, the only one he owned, purchased for last year's graduation ceremony. He'd arrived early to help arrange chairs, a habit born from years of faculty meetings, but now found himself awkwardly aware of every corporate eye that turned his way. "Dad, you're fidgeting." Emily sat beside him, there as the student representative for the robotics club. "And you never fidget." Before he could respond, the door opened. The room fell silent as Sarah Williams Mitchell entered, her presence commanding attention without effort. Michael's heart stopped, then started again with uncomfortable force. The woman from the gas station, the CEO of Innovatech. Sarah, 20 years, fell away in an instant. "Thank you all for coming," Sarah began, her voice carrying the same warm authority he remembered from their university debates. "Innovatech is excited to partner with Silicon Valley High for what we hope will be a groundbreaking STEM initiative." Their eyes met across the room. Michael saw the flicker of recognition in hers, the slight softening around her mouth that most would miss. She'd known. She'd orchestrated this entire meeting. "Our goal," Sarah continued, clicking through her presentation, "is to bridge the gap between classroom theory and real-world innovation. Mr. Chen's robotics program in particular has caught our attention." Emily straightened beside him, practically vibrating with excitement. Michael forced himself to focus on the slides, on the numbers, on anything but the way Sarah's hands moved as she spoke, the same elegant gestures that had once traced equations in the air during their late-night study sessions. The presentation outlined a vision that seemed pulled from their old conversations. Open-source technology education, community innovation labs, mentorship programs linking students with industry leaders. It was everything they'd once dreamed of creating together, now backed by corporate millions. "Questions?" Sarah asked, concluding her presentation. Several hands shot up, but her eyes found his. "Mr. Chen?" "The program sounds impressive," he managed. Professional mask firmly in place. "But what about accessibility? Not every student has access to high-end equipment at home." A smile tugged at her lips. He was still asking the same questions, still championing the underdogs. "Actually, we've considered that." She pulled up a new slide. "Each participating student will receive a complete development kit regardless of family income." Emily's hand shot up next. "Will we have access to Innovatech's AI labs? My team's been working on an adaptive learning algorithm, but we're limited by processing power." Michael watched Sarah's expression shift as she studied his daughter. Surprise, recognition, something softer he couldn't quite name. "That's exactly the kind of initiative we want to support. Perhaps you could tell me more about your project." After the meeting, the discussion continued, but Michael's attention kept drifting to the way Sarah seamlessly addressed every concern, anticipated every obstacle. She'd always been brilliant at strategy, at seeing 10 moves ahead. Had she planned this moment from the instant she'd recognized him at the gas station? As the meeting wound down, people began gathering in small groups, discussing possibilities. Emily was already deep in conversation with one of the Innovatech engineers, gesturing animatedly about her project. "She has your enthusiasm for quantum," Theory. Sarah's voice came from behind him. And your habit of asking the uncomfortable questions. Michael turned. Up close he could see the tiny lines around her eyes, the subtle silver threads in her dark hair. Changes that only made her more striking. You could have just called. Would you have answered? Her question was gentle, without accusation. I don't know. It was the most honest answer he could give. Sarah nodded, accepting this. The gas station. I almost said something then. But you didn't. Neither did you. She smiled slightly. Some things never change. We're still both waiting for the other person to make the first move in any theoretical discussion. The mention of theory brought back a flood of memories. Quantum probability, parallel universes, paths not taken. Sarah, about what happened. Dad! Emily bounded over, her eyes shining. Ms. Williams-Mitchell, your engineer said our project might qualify for the advanced development track. Could I show you the preliminary designs? Sarah's professional mask slipped for just a moment as she looked between them. I'd like that very much. Perhaps over coffee? I seem to remember your father having strong opinions about proper brewing. Temperatures? The invitation hung in the air, weighted with 2 decades of unspoken words. Michael felt Emily's questioning gaze, saw the careful hope in Sarah's eyes. There's a place down the street, he found himself saying. They still make coffee the old-fashioned way. The way you taught me, Sarah replied softly, and for a moment they were back in that university lab, arguing about thermal conductivity, while the ancient coffee maker sputtered in the background. Emily looked between them, her expression shifting, from excitement to dawning realization. Wait, do you two know each other? Michael met Sarah's eyes, saw his own mixture of fear and possibility reflected there. How do you explain quantum entanglement to a heart that's been carefully maintaining its collapsed state for 20 years? It's a long story, Sarah answered for both of them. One that might be better told over properly brewed coffee. As they gathered their things to leave, Michael caught sight of their reflection in the conference room window, the 3 of them together, like some alternate universe's family photo. Emily's enthusiasm, Sarah's quiet confidence, his own cautious hope. The scene looked both impossible and somehow inevitable, like parallel lines finally meeting at infinity. Principal Martinez stuck his head in the door. Wonderful meeting, Ms. Williams-Mitchell. Mr. Chen, don't forget the physics department budget is due tomorrow. Reality crashed back in. He was still a high school teacher, she was still a CEO, and there were 2 decades of choices and consequences between them. But as they walked toward the coffee shop, Emily chattering about AI algorithms while Sarah listened intently, Michael allowed himself to wonder if some quantum states could be rebuilt, one coffee conversation at a time. The coffee shop had changed. Names 3 times since their university days, but the exposed brick walls and mismatched furniture remained the same. Sarah ran her finger along the wooden table's surface, finding the familiar groove where she and Michael had once carved their initials during an all-night study session. They still haven't fixed this table, she murmured, more to herself than to her companions. Michael set down 3 cups, 1 black coffee, 1 latte with an extra shot, and 1 hot chocolate with whipped cream for Emily. Some things are better, left unchanged. Emily looked between them, her quick mind obviously piecing things together. So, you 2 went to college together. We were lab partners, Michael said. At the same moment, Sarah replied, we were dating. A small smile touched Michael's lips. Both are true. For 3 years, Sarah added softly. She watched Emily's eyes widen with understanding. Wait, was this at Stanford? When you were working on quantum computing? Emily leaned forward, nearly knocking over her hot chocolate. Dad, is she the one who wrote in your old textbook? The one you never let me read? Michael's cheeks colored slightly. You've been snooping in my books again. I'm your daughter. It's literally my job to snoop. Emily turned to Sarah. So what happened? Why didn't you stay in touch? Emily, Michael's. A voice carried a warning note, but Sarah held up her hand. It's a fair question. She took a sip of her latte, made exactly as she used to drink it. Of course he'd remembered. Life happened, different dreams, different paths. I was focused on commercializing our research, building what would become Innovatech. Your father... She paused, realizing she didn't actually know the full story. I became a dad, Michael finished simply. Priorities shifted. Emily sat back, absorbing this. Because of me. Because of choices I made. Michael corrected gently. Good choices. The best choices. Sarah watched their interaction, seeing the years of love and understanding built between them. Your father was always the better physicist, you know. He understood that observation changes outcomes, that you have to be present in the moment, not just theorizing about future possibilities. Emily pulled out her laptop, launching into an explanation that bridged their past and present with uncanny precision. Sarah watched Michael's face as he followed their daughter's reasoning, saw the same passion that had first drawn her to him 2 decades ago. The quantum entanglement model is elegant, Sarah noted, pointing to Emily's diagram. But have you considered using non-local correlations to enhance the emotional recognition patterns? Emily finished. That's what Dad suggested, but we don't have the processing power to test it. You do now, Sarah said firmly. Innovatech's quantum lab is at your disposal. She looked at Michael. Both of you, if you're interested. The offer hung between them like an equation waiting to be solved. Michael studied his coffee cup, turning it slowly. That's generous. It's selfish, actually. Sarah met his questioning look. Your theories were always ahead of their time, Michael. Maybe they were just waiting for the right moment and the right team. Emily looked between them again, hope and calculation mixing in her expression. Does this mean? Now you're just being kind, Michael protested. You're the one who built an empire built on your theories. Sarah met his surprised look. Our early AI work, the empathy algorithms everyone's talking about, they're all based on your papers about quantum consciousness and human interaction. Emily's eyes lit up. The ones from his unfinished dissertation. Dad, you never told me. Because they were just theories, Michael interrupted. Sarah's the one who made them work. In the real world, we made them work, Sarah corrected. Back in the lab, before. She trailed off, remembering late nights of coding and debates, of shared dreams and infinite possibilities. A notification buzzed on her phone. Another board meeting. Another crisis needing attention. She silenced it. You know, Emily said thoughtfully, our robotics project is basically trying to do what you two were working on back then. Teaching machines to understand human emotional states through quantum-inspired neural networks. Sarah and Michael exchanged glances. Show me, they said simultaneously, then laughed at their sync. Emily pulled out her laptop, launching into an explanation that bridged their past and present with uncanny precision. Sarah watched Michael's face as he followed their daughters. Reasoning, saw the same passion that had first drawn her to him 2 decades ago. The quantum entanglement model is elegant, Sarah noted, pointing to Emily's diagram. But have you considered using non-local correlations to enhance the emotional recognition patterns? Emily finished. That's what Dad suggested, but we don't have the processing power to test it. You do now, Sarah said firmly. Innovatech's quantum lab is at your disposal. She looked at Michael. Both of you, if you're interested. The offer hung between them like an equation waiting to be solved. Michael studied his coffee cup, turning it slowly. That's generous. It's selfish, actually. Sarah met his questioning. Look, your theories were always ahead of their time, Michael. Maybe they were just waiting for the right moment and the right team. Emily looked between them again, hope and calculation mixing in her expression. Does this mean you'll be around? More Ms. Williams-Mitchell? Sarah, she corrected automatically, and that depends on your father. Michael was quiet for a long moment, his fingers finding the carved initials on the table. The last time we collaborated, things got complicated. We were different people then. Sarah leaned forward slightly. I was so focused on proving myself, on building something huge, that I forgot why we started in the first place. But watching Emily explain her project, it reminded me of us, of what we wanted to achieve. Which was what? Emily asked. To make technology more human, Michael answered, his eyes meeting Sarah's, to bridge the gap between pure science and real connection. That's still what I want, Sarah said softly. I just took a very long detour to figure it out. The coffee shop had begun to fill with afternoon customers, the modern world intruding on their bubble of shared memory and possibility. Emily's phone chimed with a reminder about Robotics Club. I should get back to school, she said, gathering her things, but maybe we could do this again. All of us, for the project. Sarah watched Michael's expression, saw him weighing past and present, risk and potential. Finally, he smiled, that same warm smile that had once made her believe anything was possible. I think, he said carefully, we have a lot of catching up to do, scientifically speaking. Scientifically speaking, Sarah agreed, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She stood, straightening her blazer out of habit. I'll have my team send over the lab access credentials for both of you. As they prepared to leave, Emily paused, looking at the carved initials. You know, there's a quantum mechanics joke here somewhere, about old connections and new observations. Your father used to say something similar, Sarah recalled, about how some particles never really lose their connection, Michael finished. They just need the right moment to prove it. Outside, the Silicon Valley sun painted everything in possibilities. Sarah watched father and daughter head toward the school, seeing in their easy interaction everything she'd missed and everything she might still find. 20 years ago, she'd chosen ambition over connection. Now, perhaps, she could choose both. The Mountain View Community Center's ancient projector sputtered to life, casting Innovatech's development plans across the wall. Michael sat in the back row, his coffee growing cold as he watched the presentation unfold. Each slide revealed another piece of what Sarah's company had planned for their small community: gleaming office complexes, startup incubators, and innovation zones that would transform the familiar landscape of his neighborhood. The proposed tech corridor will create thousands of new jobs, the Innovatech presenter explained, his corporate enthusiasm at odds with the concerned murmurs from the audience. Property values are projected to increase by 40% within the first year alone. Michael's stomach tightened. 40%. He thought of Mr. Rodriguez, who ran the local garage where he got his car fixed, and Mrs. Chen, no relation, who'd owned the corner market for 30 years. People who'd never be able to afford those kinds of increases. His phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Dad, Sarah just showed me the quantum lab. It's amazing. When can you come see it? The excitement in his daughter's message made his heart. Oogie, the past week had been a whirlwind of lab visits and project discussions, of watching Emily flourish under Sarah's mentorship, of feeling his own old passions for research rekindling every time Sarah's hand brushed his over a keyboard, every time she finished one of his sentences about quantum theory. Phase 1 begins with the acquisition of several key properties, the presenter continued. The old commercial district will be... You mean forcing out local businesses? The question came from Tom Martinez, who owned the coffee shop where he and Sarah had reconnected. Some of us have been here for generations. We prefer to think of it as urban renewal, the presenter replied smoothly. Innovatech is prepared to offer generous relocation packages. Michael's phone buzzed again. This time it was Sarah. Emily's project is brilliant. She has your intuition for quantum mechanics. Dinner tonight to discuss next steps? He stared at the message, remembering how natural it had felt yesterday in the lab, the three of them working together. How right it had seemed when Sarah explained her vision of merging education and innovation, of creating opportunities for students like Emily. But he hadn't known the full scope then. hadn't realized that her community initiative was just the friendly face of a corporate takeover. The educational partnership with local schools, the presenter was saying, spearheaded by our CEO Sarah Williams Mitchell herself, demonstrates Innovatech's commitment to... Michael stood abruptly, drawing curious looks from his neighbors. He needed air, needed to think. Outside, the evening air carried the scent of Mrs. Chen's famous dumplings from down the street. A group of his students passed by, heading to the burger joint that had been their parents' favorite hangout spot 20 years ago. All of it endangered by progress, wrapped in promises. Another text from Sarah. Michael? About dinner? His fingers hovered over the phone. How could he explain that the woman who'd captured his heart twice, once with theoretical physics and again with her genuine care for Emily's future, was also the architect of his community's displacement? Her door opened behind him, and Principal Martinez stepped out. Quite a presentation, eh? The older man's expression was knowing. Quite a coincidence, too, Innovatech choosing our little corner of Silicon Valley, right after their CEO started taking such an interest in our STEM program. Tom, Michael started, but Martinez held up a hand. I'm not judging, Michael. God knows we need the resources for our students, but those same students need homes they can afford to live in, communities that remember their names. Michael's phone buzzed one final time. Emily. Dad, Sarah's showing me the AI labs next. This is everything we dreamed about for the robotics club. Everything they dreamed about. But whose dreams? And at what cost? He thought of Sarah in the lab yesterday, her eyes alight with the same passion he'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. She wasn't being deliberately cruel. If anything, she truly believed she was helping. The Sarah he knew would never intentionally harm a community, but the Sarah he knew had been gone for 20 years, replaced by a CEO whose vision of progress looked very different from street level. Inside, the presentation concluded with an architect's rendering of the new mountain view. All glass and steel and carefully curated green spaces. No sign of Mr. Rodriguez's garage or Mrs. Chen's market or the countless other small businesses that gave their community its heart. His phone felt heavy in his hand as he finally typed a response to Sarah. Can't tonight. Need to review some things about the development plan. Talk tomorrow? Her reply came instantly. Of course, everything okay? He looked at the community center where people were now filing out with worried faces and hushed conversations. At the street where he'd taught Emily to ride her bike, where his students gathered after school, where life happened in all its messy, unplanned glory. Not sure, he wrote back honestly. There's a lot to process. The final text from Sarah carried a weight she couldn't have intended. That's what I love about you, Michael. Always thinking through all the implications. See you in the lab tomorrow? Love. Implications. Tomorrow. Each word a variable in an equation he wasn't sure how to solve. Emily bounded out of the community center, her face glowing with excitement about her day at Innovatech. Dad, you won't believe what Sarah showed me. We can actually test all our quantum theories now. And she says, Michael listened to his daughter's enthusiasm, watching their neighbors disperse with their fears and dreams clutched close. Somewhere between the glass towers of tomorrow and the warm brick streets of today, there had to be an answer. He just hoped he could find it before he had to choose between the woman who'd reawakened his heart and the community that had given it a home. The Mountain View Civic Center buzzed with tension as Sarah took the stage. Under the harsh, fluorescent lights, her tailored suit felt like armor, appropriate given what she was about to face. The town hall meeting had drawn hundreds, filling every seat and lining the walls. In the third row, Emily sat beside an empty chair that should have held Michael. Thank you all for coming, Sarah began, her CEO voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Innovatech is excited to share our complete vision for the Mountain View Innovation Corridor. The doors at the back of the hall opened. Michael slipped in, clutching a folder and looking more formal than she'd ever seen him. Their eyes met briefly before he took his seat beside Emily. The tension in his shoulders told her everything. "Our investment in this community goes beyond buildings," Sarah continued, advancing her slides. "We're creating an ecosystem where education, innovation, and opportunity intersect. At what cost?" The question cut through her presentation. Michael had stood, his voice carrying the quiet authority she remembered from their university debates. "The proposal shows property. Tax increases that would force out half the families in my classroom." Sarah's practiced smile faltered. They hadn't spoken properly in days, not since he'd discovered the full scope of the development plans. "The increased revenue will fund better schools, better resources for whoever can afford to stay." Michael held up his folder. "I've analyzed the impact projections. Within 5 years, most of our current students would be priced out of the district." Emily looked between them, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning comprehension. Around the room, murmurs grew louder. "Change is difficult," Sarah acknowledged, fighting to maintain her professional demeanor. "But progress isn't progress if it destroys what made this community worth investing in." Michael moved to the center aisle. "You talk about innovation. Ecosystems, but real ecosystems grow organically. They don't get bulldozed and replaced overnight." Sarah's heart pounded. This was exactly the confrontation she'd been dreading, personal and professional worlds colliding in the worst possible way. "Michael, you of all people understand the potential here, the opportunities we're creating." "For whom?" He opened his folder, and Sarah recognized the papers, her own impact reports, annotated in his familiar handwriting. "Your quantum labs are amazing, Sarah. Your AI research is groundbreaking, but you're so focused on the future that you're willing to sacrifice the present." In the third row, Emily had shrunk into her seat, looking devastated. Sarah felt a stab of guilt. They'd dragged their rekindled connection into a public battleground, with their daughter caught in the crossfire. "Perhaps," Sarah said carefully, "we should discuss this in a more appropriate forum." Michael's laugh held no humor. "Like the private meetings where these decisions were really made. While you used our past connection, use my daughter's dreams to soften the community for corporate takeover." The accusation hit harder than she'd expected. "That's not fair." "No, it's not." His voice softened. "None of this is fair. Not to the families who've built lives here, not to the students who deserve both stability and opportunity." He paused, meeting her eyes. "Not to us." The room had gone silent, the personal undercurrent in their exchange impossible to miss. Sarah gripped the podium, her carefully constructed walls crumbling. "I never meant to—" "To what? To make me fall for you again while you planned to dismantle my community? To mentor our daughter while pricing out her friends? Our daughter!" The words escaped before Sarah could stop them. Emily stood abruptly. "I have to go." She pushed past Michael and ran for the door. Wait!" Michael turned to follow, then looked back at Sarah with an expression that broke her heart. "You know what the truly ironic part is? Your AI empathy algorithms, the ones making Innovatech billions, they're based on my old research about technology serving humanity, not replacing it." Sarah stepped away from the podium, her corporate mask forgotten. "Michael, please!" But he was already heading for the door, following their daughter. The room erupted in chaos, reporters shouting questions, community members arguing amongst themselves. Sarah stood frozen, watching everything she'd carefully planned collapse like a failed quantum experiment. Her phone buzzed, the board demanding updates. On the screen behind her, Innovatech's vision for the future gleamed in perfect soulless renderings. In the back of the room, she spotted Tom from the coffee shop, his expression a mix of sympathy and disappointment. "Ms. Williams-Mitchell?" Her assistant appeared at her elbow. "The media is requesting statements about your personal connection." "To clear my schedule," Sarah interrupted. "All of it." "But the board—" needs to understand that some things matter more than quarterly projections. Sarah gathered her papers with trembling hands. Find me everything we have on community-led development. Case studies, alternative models, anything. You're not considering changing the entire plan. That's exactly what I'm considering. Sarah looked at the empty doorway where Michael and Emily had disappeared. 20 years ago, I chose corporate. Ambition over human connection. I told myself I was choosing progress over sentiment, but he was right. What's progress worth if it destroys the very things that make innovation meaningful? The assistant blinked, clearly unused to seeing her. The EO so raw. The shareholders won't like it. The shareholders don't have to watch their daughter run away from a public fight between her parents. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. Parents. God, I didn't even know I could claim that title until he said it. The civic center was emptying, now leaving behind scattered papers and shattered illusions. Sarah walked to where Michael had been standing, picked up the folder he'd dropped in his rush to follow Emily. Inside, along with the annotated reports, she found something that made her breath catch. Their old quantum mechanics paper, the one they'd written together with a new note in the margin. Some connections can't be broken, only transformed. The question is, into what? Sarah pressed the paper to her chest, feeling the weight of choices past and present. She'd thought she was building a future, but Michael was right. She'd been trying to replace one reality with another, instead of letting them exist in quantum superposition, both valuable, both true. The question was, could she find a way to collapse this wave function into a state where progress and preservation coexisted? Where corporate vision and community values reinforced rather than destroyed each other? And more importantly, could she repair the quantum entanglement of their hearts before the decoherence became permanent? Sarah found herself back at the old, a coffee shop well past midnight, sitting at their carved initial table with a stack of documents she hadn't looked at in 20 years. Her original business plan for Innovatech, written in a cramped university apartment, was filled with Michael's margin notes, questions, suggestions, and enthusiastic exclamation points that made her heart ache. I thought I might find you here. She looked up to find Michael in the doorway, looking as exhausted as she felt. Tom, the owner, hovered behind him with concern etched on his face. I'll leave you two to talk, Tom said, setting down 2 cups of coffee. Just remember, this place has survived 30 years of Silicon Valley changes. Maybe there's a lesson in that. After he left, Michael sat across from her, his eyes falling on the scattered papers. Is that our original vision? Sarah pushed the business plan toward him. Page 6 is particularly interesting, where you wrote about technology adapting to communities, not the other way around. Michael picked up the yellowed pages, a small smile touching his lips. The quantum nature of human interaction requires flexible, responsive systems, he read. I was pretty philosophical back then. You were right. Sarah wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that innovation isn't just about building something new. It's about nurturing what already works. Sarah, I found Emily, she interrupted, at the Quantum Lab. She was recalibrating the entire empathy algorithm to account for community impact variables. Sarah's voice caught. She has your heart, Michael, and your brilliant mind. Our daughter, Michael said softly, testing the words. That's what you reacted to at the meeting, when I said our daughter. I never thought... Sarah blinked back tears. All these years, I told myself I was building something that mattered. But watching her run out of that meeting, seeing what my progress was doing to both of you, Michael reached across the table, his fingers brushing the business plan. You did build something that matters. Innovatech's work is revolutionary. But maybe it's time for a revolution in how we do it? Sarah pulled out another document, a hastily sketched alternative development plan. What if instead of replacing the community, we enhanced it? Small business incubators in existing buildings, educational partnerships that preserve neighborhood character, quantum computing resources for local entrepreneurs. Like a symbiosis, Michael mused, his teacher's mind engaging. Instead of forcing evolution, creating conditions for natural growth. Exactly. Sarah leaned forward. The quantum labs don't need a glass tower. They could revitalize the old warehouse district. The AI research could partner with local businesses to develop real-world applications. And the STEM program, she hesitated. Well, that depends on whether its faculty advisor is still willing to work with me. Michael was quiet for a long moment, studying the woman before him. Not the CEO, but the brilliant student he'd fallen in love with, who'd somehow found her way back to their shared principles. Emily's algorithm, he said finally. It's not just about community impact, is it? She's trying to bridge worlds, like her parents should have done 20 years ago. She's smarter than both of us. Sarah smiled through her tears. Michael, I know I can't undo. He reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb finding the familiar groove of their carved initials. Maybe we stop trying to undo the past. Maybe we just build a better future. Together this time. Outside, the first hints of dawn were touching the Silicon Valley sky. In a few hours, this coffee shop would fill with students and entrepreneurs, locals and tech workers, all part of the quantum fabric of community that couldn't be reduced to simple ones and zeros. Together, Sarah repeated, the word holding both promise and question. Michael squeezed her hand. I hear there's a pretty good physics teacher who might be willing to consult on community-integrated development. If the CEO is serious about a new approach, I hear that physics teacher has an incredibly talented daughter who's already revolutionizing how we think about AI and human connection. Their eyes met over decades of choices and changes, loss and possibility. Through the window, they could see both their reflection and the street beyond, past and present, personal and professional, all existing in the same space, waiting to collapse into a new reality of their choosing. So, Michael said softly, want to help me grade some physics papers while we reimagine the future? Sarah laughed, the sound carrying all the warmth of their shared past and the hope of their emerging future. Only if you help me explain quantum entanglement to my board of directors. The Innovatech conference room felt different at ground level. Sarah had insisted on moving the community planning sessions from the executive floor to a street-facing room that looked out on the neighborhood they were trying to preserve. Today, the large table was covered with maps, drawings, and Emily's laptop displaying real-time simulations of community impact metrics. If we adapt the quantum processing units to run on distributed networks, Emily explained, highlighting clusters. On the map, we can create micro-innovation hubs in existing buildings. Mrs. Chen's market could host an AI-driven inventory system that other small businesses could learn from. Michael watched their daughter with pride as she commanded the attention of both corporate executives and community leaders. Sarah stood at Emily's shoulder, adding notes to the presentation with the same focused expression she'd worn in their university study sessions. The processing power would still be centralized, Sarah mused, but the access points would be woven into the community fabric, like quantum nodes in a neural network. Exactly! Emily pulled up her revised algorithm, and look what happens to the community stability metrics when we factor in preserved local businesses. Tom from the coffee shop leaned forward, squinting at the graphs. So we'd keep our buildings but get upgraded infrastructure and training for new technology. Better than that, Michael said, warming to the vision. Your businesses become living laboratories for innovation. Students like Emily learn from real-world applications, while entrepreneurs get the benefits of cutting-edge technology. Sarah's hand brushed his as she reached for a marker, sending a familiar tingle up his arm. Together, they'd spent the past week redesigning Innovatech's approach from the ground up. Every late-night planning session felt like their old study dates, only now they were solving for community variables instead of quantum equations. The key is gradual integration, Sarah explained to the group. No sudden changes, no displacement. We grow together. She looked at Michael. Someone very wise recently reminded me that real ecosystems evolve naturally. Mrs. Chen, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. And my grandson. He wants to study computers, but can't afford college. That's where this comes in. Emily pulled up another diagram. Each microhub includes an education center. Local students get direct mentorship, internship opportunities, and guaranteed scholarships, Sarah added. Innovatech commits to funding college education for students from participating businesses. The room buzzed with cautious optimism. Michael studied Sarah's face as she moved through the crowd, answering questions with genuine engagement. The corporate mask was gone, replaced by the passionate researcher he'd fallen in love with twice now. This could work, Tom said quietly beside him, but only if they truly listen to us, all of us. That's why we need this. Michael pointed to Emily's laptop, where her empathy algorithm continued running simulations. Technology that learns from human experience instead of trying to replace it. Like parents learning from their children? Tom's knowing smile made Michael chuckle. Something like that. The meeting continued as sunset painted the streets gold. Through the windows, they could see students from Michael's physics class mingling with Innovatech engineers at the coffee shop across the street. Two worlds, not colliding but converging. Emily's algorithm blinked with new data, incorporating feedback from each conversation. Sarah had given her full access to Innovatech's quantum computers, and the results were extraordinary. A living model of community dynamics that could predict and prevent negative impacts before they occurred. You know what this reminds me of? Sarah said softly, joining Michael by the window. That night we first talked about quantum consciousness, about how observation shapes reality. I remember. You said we needed to build computers that could observe with human wisdom. And now, our daughter has done exactly that. Sarah's shoulder pressed against his, warm and real. She's shown us how to observe both futures at once, progress and preservation in superposition. Outside, Mrs. Chen was teaching an Innovatech programmer about traditional cooking techniques, while he showed her how tablet ordering could streamline her business, the future and the past, learning from each other. Well, Michael said, watching Emily guide another group through her simulation, I guess some quantum entanglements really do lead to better observations. Sarah's hand found his, their fingers intertwining like the community threads in their daughter's model. And better outcomes, she whispered, for everyone. The evening light filtered through the blinds of Michael's living room, casting gentle shadows across scattered takeout containers and Emily's project notes. Family dinner had become a regular occurrence over the past 2 weeks, though dinner usually meant working through community proposals while sharing Chinese food from Mrs. Chen's market. Found it. Emily emerged from the hallway clutching a worn photo album. Dad used to hide this in his closet, but I'm basically a professional snooper. Sarah set aside her laptop, something vulnerable crossing her face as Emily settled between them on the couch. The album's first page showed Michael holding a tiny bundle, his face a mixture of terror and joy. Your adoption day, Sarah said softly. You were so small. Dad cries every time he tells the story. Emily bumped her shoulder against Michael's. Go on, tell her. You know you want to. Michael cleared his throat, aware of Sarah's intense focus. I was in the middle of my dissertation defense when I got the call. My cousin Lisa, there had been an accident. She was a single mom, no other family except me. He traced the photo's edge. The committee was not pleased when I ran out mid-presentation. He never went back, Emily added. Chose me instead. Sarah's hand found Michael's across the back of the couch. That's why you disappeared. I assumed you'd chosen academia over our startup plans. And I thought you'd chosen corporate. Success over our research streams. Michael turned the page, revealing Emily's early years. First steps, science fair projects, robotics competitions. Life has a way of choosing for us, sometimes. Emily studied Sarah's expression. Are you sad? That you missed all this? Yes, Sarah answered honestly, but I'm grateful to your father for giving you such a wonderful life. And I'm here now if you want me to be. The question hung in the air, weighted with possibility. Emily fiddled with her tablet, pulling up her community impact algorithm. You know, the model shows that adaptive systems require multiple, stable reference points, like quantum entanglement across time. Michael and Sarah exchanged knowing looks. Their daughter, processing emotions through physics. What I mean is, Emily continued, maybe we don't have to pretend those years didn't happen. Maybe they're part of the equation too. Sarah reached for the album, then hesitated. May I? Emily nodded, and together they turned pages. Birthday parties, science experiments gone wrong, father-daughter dances. A life built on love and discovery, documented in fading photographs. I was so focused on changing the world, Sarah murmured, I forgot that the world is made of moments like these. You were changing it, though, Michael said. Everything you built at Innovatech, it matters. And now we're changing it together. Emily pulled up her latest simulation. Look, the new community center design incorporates Dad's teaching. Philosophy with your quantum computing framework. The past and future synchronized. Sarah studied the screen, then looked at the photo album. Like parallel processing? Like family, Emily corrected, then yawned. Speaking of which, I have physics homework. Dad, try not to tell too many embarrassing stories while I'm gone. They watched her head upstairs, leaving them alone with the visual history of their time apart. Michael turned to the last page, where a recent photo showed all three of them in the quantum lab, heads bent over Emily's project. She's remarkable, Sarah said. Brilliant and compassionate and sneaky, Michael smiled. The photo album wasn't in my closet. She planted it there, knowing you were coming over. Definitely your daughter. Sarah's laugh faded into something more serious. Our daughter. Michael, I know we can't get those years back, but he closed the album gently. Maybe we're exactly where we need to be. It took us 20 years to figure out how to merge quantum physics and human connection. Emily did it in 17. She had a good teacher. She has two now. Sarah leaned back, her shoulder settling against his in a way that felt both new and familiar. Upstairs, they could hear Emily's music mixing with the tap of keyboard keys, the soundtrack of their emerging future. You know, Sarah said, there's this theory about quantum time, that every moment exists simultaneously. We just experience them linearly. Michael smiled. Are you suggesting all our moments, past and future, are entangled? I'm suggesting, she turned to face him, that maybe we needed every moment, every choice, to reach this one. Above them, Emily's algorithm hummed on her laptop, processing countless variables into harmony. Outside, the street was quiet, except for the distant sound of Mrs. Chen closing her market, Tom's coffee shop winding down for the night. A community preparing for tomorrow, preserved and evolving all at once, like family, like love, like quantum possibilities, finally observed. The Innovatech boardroom felt colder than usual. Sarah stood at the head of the table, facing the skeptical expressions of her board members as she presented the revised Mountain View development plan. A 40% reduction in projected revenue. Bradley Morrison's voice dripped with disapproval, all to preserve a few local shops. Sarah, what's happened to you? Sarah met his gaze steadily, though her pulse raced. On the screen behind, Emily's community impact metrics painted a different story than the usual profit projections. What's happened is that we've found a better way, sustainable growth that benefits everyone. This isn't a charity, Diana Chen interrupted, tapping her tablet. The shareholders are already nervous about your personal involvement in Mountain View. A photo appeared on the main screen, Sarah, Michael and Emily at the coffee shop, heads bent over project plans. The image had appeared in several tech blogs, usually alongside speculation about the CEO's emotional compromise. My personal life isn't relevant to It is when you're throwing away millions to protect your boyfriend's neighborhood. Bradley's words cut sharp. And let's talk about the quantum lab access you've granted to a high school student. That high school student has revolutionized our empathy algorithms, Sarah shot back. Emily's work has applications far beyond... Emily? Diana raised an eyebrow. You're on a first-name basis with teenagers now? Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Em's presentation to the community council went amazing. Wish you could have been there. She stared at the message, feeling the weight of worlds colliding. In the past weeks, she'd found something she'd forgotten could exist. A sense of purpose beyond profit margins, of family beyond corporate structure. The board has concerns, Bradley continued. Your judgment seems compromised. Perhaps it's time to consider a temporary step back from day-to-day operations. Sarah's fingers tightened on her phone. You want to remove me? We want to protect the company you built. Diana's tone softened slightly. Take a sabbatical. Clear your head. Let us handle the Mountain View situation with proper business metrics. The threat was clear. Step aside or be pushed. Sarah looked at the community impact display, seeing not just numbers, but faces. Mrs. Chen teaching coding basics to her grandson, Tom's coffee shop hosting tech meetups, Emily's eyes shining as she explained quantum theory to local students. Her phone buzzed. Again, this time it was Emily. Dad says corporate stuff is keeping you busy, but I solved that quantum processing distribution problem. Can't wait to show you. Something settled in Sarah's chest, a certainty she hadn't felt since her startup days. You're right about one thing, she said, straightening. I have changed. I've remembered why I started this company. She pulled up the original Innovatech mission statement. Right here, to create technology that serves humanity, not replaces it. Naive idealism, Bradley scoffed. The market demands innovation, real innovation. Sarah advanced to Emily's latest simulation results. Look at these engagement metrics. The community integration model doesn't just preserve local businesses, it turns them into living laboratories. Every shop becomes a test case, every student a potential innovator. And your personal relationships? Diana pressed. Can you remain objective? Sarah thought of the photo album, of all the moments she'd missed pursuing corporate success, of Michael's quiet strength and Emily's brilliant mind, of a community that had shown her how technology and humanity could truly merge. I'm not stepping back, she said firmly, but I will step down if that's what the board demands, and I'll take our quantum computing patents with me, the ones registered in my name. Along with the empathy algorithms Emily and I developed, the room fell silent. They all knew those patents formed the core of Innovatech's market advantage. You wouldn't, Bradley breathed. For family? For the right vision of the future? Sarah smiled slightly. Try me. Her phone lit up one more time. Michael, whatever's happening in there, remember quantum superposition. All possibilities exist until observed. Choose the one that feels true. Sarah touched the screen gently, then faced her board. Here's what's going to happen. We're implementing the community integration plan, all of it. If you want to fight me on this, I'll take everything I mentioned to a new company, one that remembers its core mission. Your choice. She watched them exchange glances, calculating odds and outcomes like the business people they were. In her pocket, her phone buzzed again, carrying the weight of family and future. No matter what they decided, she had already made her choice. Some equations, she'd finally learned, mattered more than profit margins. The old warehouse that had once stored Silicon Valley's forgotten hardware dreams now hummed with new energy. Michael stood in the entrance, watching as Mrs. Chen demonstrated her family's dumpling folding technique to a group of fascinated Innovatech engineers. Behind them, Emily's AI system captured every movement, analyzing the artisanal process for both preservation and optimization. See how the dough responds differently based on temperature and humidity? Emily explained to the engineers. We're using quantum sensors to map the variables that human experts understand intuitively. It's like encoding generations of wisdom into data. Sarah appeared at Michael's side, her corporate attire softened by a light dusting of flour. "Your daughter just turned my quantum computing team into dumpling apprentices." "Our daughter," he corrected gently, "just showed them that innovation doesn't always mean reinvention." The warehouse space, now dubbed the Community Innovation Hub, represented their vision made real. Local businesses occupied the ground floor, each enhanced by carefully integrated technology. Tom's coffee shop had expanded into a corner space, where baristas worked alongside an AI-driven brewing system that had learned from Tom's decades of expertise. "The board's quarterly projections arrived," Sarah said, pulling out her tablet. "Look at the engagement metrics." Michael studied the graphs, noting how community participation had exceeded all corporate benchmarks. "Is that enough to keep them happy?" "Happy might be stretching it," Sarah smiled. "But Emily's empathy algorithms are drawing attention from major tech players. Turns out, teaching AI to respect and learn from human experience has applications far beyond Mountain View." Across the room, Bradley Morrison, the once skeptical board member, was sampling Mrs. Chen's dumplings with an expression of surprised delight. The corporate team had arrived for a routine inspection, only to find themselves drawn into the living laboratory of community innovation. "Mrs. Chen," Bradley called out, "you mentioned something about an inventory system." The elderly shop owner nodded proudly. "Emily helped me set it up. It learns from my experience, knows when to order ingredients based on weather, local events, customer patterns. But it asks me before making changes. Respectful, like a good student." Sarah squeezed Michael's hand. "Speaking of students," she nodded toward the back of the warehouse, where Emily was leading a workshop for local high school kids. The teenagers clustered around quantum computing displays, their eyes wide with possibility. "Full scholarships," Sarah whispered. "The board finally approved the education fund. Every student who completes the Community Innovation Program gets a free ride to the university of their choice." Michael watched as their daughter moved through the group, her explanation of quantum principles peppered with real-world applications. From the businesses around them, she had her mother's gift for strategy, her father's passion for teaching, and something entirely her own, an ability to see connections others missed. "Mr. Chen," one of his physics students waved from Mrs. Chen's station, "we're using thermodynamics to optimize dumpling cooking times. Can we get extra credit for this?" "Extra credit for eating dumplings?" Michael laughed. "I'll have to consult with the other parent-teacher in the room." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Parent-teacher. Is that my new title? Along with CEO, Quantum, Computing Pioneer, and Dumpling Apprentice." He brushed some flour from her blazer. "You wear them all well." The afternoon sun slanted through the warehouse's restored windows, catching the dust motes that danced around bustling stations. Every corner held a different collaboration. Students learning from local experts, engineers studying traditional methods, shop owners exploring new technologies. The future and the past, not fighting for space, but enhancing each other. "You know what this reminds me of?" Sarah mused, watching Emily guide her students through a quantum entanglement demonstration using dumpling dough as a metaphor. "That paper we wrote in college about adaptive systems, how true innovation comes from the convergence of multiple knowledge states," Michael finished. "Like quantum superposition, but with human wisdom. We were onto something back then." Sarah leaned against him slightly. "We just needed 20 years and one brilliant teenager to show us how to implement it." Around them, the Community Innovation Hub continued its beautiful experiment in convergence. Mrs. Chen taught corporate engineers the secret to perfect dough, while learning about supply chain optimization. Tom explained the subtle art of coffee, roasting to AI developers who helped him reach new customers. and Emily, their quantum bridge between worlds, showed everyone how technology could preserve wisdom instead of replacing it. "So," Michael said softly, "still worried about those board members?" Sarah watched as Bradley enthusiastically typed notes about Mrs. Chen's inventory system. "I think they're learning what we learned. Sometimes the best way forward is to respect what came before. Like quantum entanglement, like family, like love. All states existing simultaneously, each made stronger by the connection." 2 hours before the Global Tech Press Conference, Sarah stood in her office, staring at an email that threatened to unravel everything. A major tech competitor was attempting a hostile takeover of Innovatech, citing her compromised leadership and deviation from profitable growth strategies. "Mom?" Emily's voice from the doorway made her heart skip. She was still getting used to being called that. "Dad sent me to check if you're ready for the demo." Sarah quickly closed the email. "Just finishing up some details." But Emily, with her father's intuition for unspoken troubles, moved closer. "The quantum processors are running the final community impact simulations. Whatever's wrong, maybe they can help solve it." "Some problems can't be solved by quantum computing," Sarah murmured, but pulled up the hostile takeover bid anyway. "How do you calculate the value of a vision, Em? In dollars and cents?" Emily studied the figures, her expression thoughtful. "You know what's interesting about quantum states? They can't be copied. You can try to replicate them, but the original relationship is unique. Like Mrs. Chen's dumplings," Sarah smiled despite her worry. "No matter how perfectly we map the process." "Exactly, and that's what they don't understand." Emily pulled up her latest simulation. "Look at the integration patterns from the Community Innovation Hub. They're organic, emergent. You can't just copy and paste that into another location." A knock at the door revealed Michael, his tie slightly askew in a way that made Sarah's heart flutter. "The press is gathering downstairs. Tom's keeping them supplied with coffee, and Mrs. Chen's dumplings are apparently winning over the tech bloggers." He paused, noting their serious expressions. "What's wrong?" Sarah handed him her tablet. His face darkened as he read. "Meridian Tech. They've been trying to replicate our empathy algorithms for months. Without success," Emily added, "because they're trying to build it from the top down instead of letting it grow from community connections." Sarah watched her. Family. The physicist who'd chosen love over ambition, the daughter who'd bridged worlds, both of them standing with her now as she faced losing everything she'd built. "The board's already received the offer," she said quietly. "Bradley called. They're considering it. But the Community Innovation Hub is working," Michael protested. "The metrics, the engagement, show success on a human scale," Sarah finished. "But Meridian's offering a 20% premium on stock value. To some, that's the only metric that matters." Emily had grown quiet, her fingers moving across her tablet with intense focus. "Mum, what if we showed them something they can't quantify in stock prices?" "What do you mean?" "The press conference. Instead of just presenting data, let's show them the quantum nature of community innovation." Her eyes shone with the same light Sarah remembered from her own startup days. "Mrs. Chen is already here with the dumplings. Tom's running the coffee station. What if we brought the hub to them?" Michael caught on first. "Turn the press conference into a living demonstration." "More than that," Emily continued. "We show them what Meridian can't copy. The human element that makes the technology work. The relationships that give the algorithms meaning." Sarah looked between them, feeling the weight of 20 years of choices shifting toward a new possibility. Bradley and the board will be there, along with Meridian's representatives. "Good." Emily's smile turned mischievous. "They should see exactly what they're trying to buy and why they can't." Michael stepped closer to Sarah, straightening her collar with familiar tenderness. "You built Innovatech to change the world. Maybe it's time to show them that the greatest innovations happen when we let the world change us too." Through the window, Sarah could see the gathering media, the arriving board members, the community partners who'd trusted her vision. 20 years ago, she'd chosen corporate success over personal connection. Today, She didn't have to choose. Emily, she said, get Mrs. Chen and her team ready. Michael, call Tom. Tell him to bring the new AI-assisted brewing system. I want every screen in that conference room showing real-time community impact data. And you? Michael asked. Sarah squared her shoulders, feeling the strength of family and purpose aligning like quantum particles finding their true state. I'm going to show them what really makes technology human. As they moved to their positions, Emily paused at the door. Mum, remember what you and Dad wrote in that old paper about how observation changes outcomes? Of course. Well, Emily grinned, let's give them something amazing to observe. Sarah watched her family go, then turned to the window again. Below, Bradley was greeting the Meridian representatives with corporate smoothness. Soon, they would all see what happened when innovation grew from community roots, when technology learned from tradition, when success was measured in connections rather than acquisitions. Let them try to put a stock price on that. The Innovatech presentation hall had never smelled like this before. Fresh coffee and dumplings mixing with the usual antiseptic tech company air. Sarah stood at the podium, watching as Mrs. Chen taught the CEO of Meridian Tech the proper way to fold a dumpling, while Emily's quantum sensors captured every nuanced movement. The simple act you're experiencing, Sarah addressed the packed room of journalists, board members, and tech executives, isn't just a cooking lesson. Watch the screens. On the displays around the room, Emily's AI system rendered the dumpling folding process in real time, breaking down generations of muscle memory into data points and learning patterns. But unlike traditional machine learning, the system wasn't trying to replace Mrs. Chen. It was learning to understand her. This is what our competitors can't replicate, Sarah continued, meeting the Meridian CEO's eyes. Not because the technology isn't sophisticated enough, but because they're asking the wrong questions. They're trying to replace human wisdom instead of amplifying it. Bradley Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The stock value considerations are short-term, Michael interrupted, stepping forward. But let me show you something about long-term value. He gestured to Tom, who was demonstrating his coffee shop's new AI-assisted brewing system to a group of fascinated tech reporters. 6 months ago, Tom was considering selling his shop. Today, he's opened 3 new locations, each one a learning center for both traditional barista skills and cutting-edge AI applications. Our quarterly profits, Bradley tried again, are up 38%. Emily cut in, her fingers flying across her tablet. Because it turns out that technology that respects human experience creates more sustainable growth than technology that tries to eliminate it. Sarah watched her daughter move through the crowd, displaying real-time data from the Community Innovation Hub. Emily had her father's gift for teaching and her mother's head for strategy. But her understanding of the intersection between human and artificial intelligence was entirely her own. What you're offering, James, Sarah addressed the Meridian CEO directly, is a return to old thinking. Bigger buildings, faster processors, more displacement of human knowledge. But look around. This room. The audience had begun to migrate naturally between demonstration stations, corporate executives learning dumpling folding while community members explored quantum computing displays. The barriers between technology and tradition, between innovation and preservation, were dissolving with each interaction. You can't buy this, Sarah said softly. You can't replicate it. Because it's not about the technology, it's about the relationships that make the technology meaningful. The market demands growth, James countered, but his eyes kept drifting to the screens showing the hub's impact metrics. The market demands innovation, Sarah corrected, real innovation. Not just faster processes or bigger profits, but better ways of understanding what makes us human. She nodded to Emily, who initiated the final demonstration. Every screen in the room lit up with a real-time neural network map of the Community Innovation Hub. Points of light showed knowledge flowing in both directions. Artificial intelligence learning from human experience, traditional practices enhanced by quantum computing, a living ecosystem of mutual growth. This is what we're actually building, Sarah said, her voice carrying layers of conviction and care. Not just better technology, but better ways of being human. And if you're here to buy that. She smiled at her family, then faced the room. It's not for sale. Bradley stood, his expression torn between corporate instinct and undeniable evidence. The board will need to... The board, Mrs. Chen interrupted, surprising everyone. Should try the dumplings first. In my family, we never make big decisions on an empty stomach. A ripple of laughter broke the tension. Even James, the Meridian CEO, couldn't help smiling as Mrs. Chen pressed a perfectly folded dumpling into his hands. Your algorithms, he admitted to Sarah, they're years ahead of anything we've developed. But it's more than that, isn't it? It's the context, the community, He gestured at the room, searching for words. The quantum entanglement, Emily supplied. Everything connected, everything enhancing everything else. You can't separate the parts without losing the whole. Sarah felt Michael's hand slip into hers as they watched their daughter explain quantum physics through dumpling metaphors to a room full of tech executives. 20 years ago, they dreamed of changing the world through pure science. Now they were changing it through something much more powerful, the integration of human wisdom and technological innovation, of family and future, of love and possibility. So, Sarah addressed the room one final time, who wants to talk about real innovation? 6 months after the presentation that changed everything, the Community Innovation Hub had become a model for tech companies worldwide. Sarah stood in her new office, relocated to the hub's ground floor, watching students stream in for their afternoon mentorship sessions. The old warehouse now hummed with a perfect synthesis of tradition and innovation. Mrs. Chen's Cooking Academy occupied one wing, where culinary AI systems learned from master chefs while preserving disappearing recipes. Tom's coffee shop had become a testing ground for next-generation service robotics, with his expertise shaping every algorithm. "Mom!" Emily burst in, her eyes bright with excitement. "The quantum processors just finished analyzing the community impact data. Look at this." Sarah studied her daughter's tablet, feeling a surge of pride at the results. Every metric showed sustainable growth, from local business revenues to student achievement scores. But more importantly, the Community Satisfaction Index had reached unprecedented levels. "Your father will want to see these numbers," Sarah said, just as Michael appeared in the doorway, reading glasses perched on his nose. "Already have," he smiled, holding up his own tablet. "The Education Board just approved our expanded scholarship program. Every community partner can now sponsor 2 students for full university funding." Sarah looked between them, her quantum family, finally aligned in all possible states. Through the window, she could see the future they'd built together, a world where innovation grew from connection, where technology served humanity by learning from it, where love and science proved to be the same force, just observed from different angles. The gas station looked exactly the same as it had a year ago, but everything else had changed. Sarah knelt beside her Tesla, demonstrating proper tire maintenance to Emily's robotics club, while Michael recorded the process for their AI training database. "And that's how a chance encounter can change everything," she concluded, making the students laugh. "More like how quantum entanglement persists across time," Emily added, sharing a knowing look with her parents. The afternoon sun painted long shadows across the parking lot as the students dispersed, heading toward Tom's newest coffee shop location across the street. Through its windows, they could see Mrs. Chen teaching another cooking class, her movements captured by gentle pulses of quantum sensors. "Hard to believe it's been a year," Michael said softly, helping Sarah to her feet. "A year since I got a flat tire and found my family?" Sarah smiled, brushing dust from her jeans. CEO attire had evolved along with everything else. Some variables were bound to align eventually. Emily hugged them both, her tablet displaying the latest community metrics. Like the theory you taught me, Dad, about how observation changes everything, and love changes what we choose to observe, Sarah added, taking Michael's hand. They stood together in the fading light, watching their transformed community thrive around them. Sometimes the most powerful innovations weren't found in laboratories or boardrooms, but in the simple courage to let connection change what seemed immutable. Like quantum particles finding their true state, they had finally collapsed all possibilities into the most natural one: family.